Okay, today we are going to learn how to make a pinwheel block. So let's get started. You're going to need 4 pieces of fabric that are 4 inches square. So you'll grab 2 pieces of fabric that are white or cream. They're 4 inches square, and then 2 pieces of fabric that are of a pattern color that are white or square. So now the next thing I do on my 2 white fabrics, I'll set these aside for a moment. I take my ruler. Now on a quilting ruler, there is a little dotted line. Now that is 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. So I like to use that line. I line it up from corner to corner on my square piece of fabric. And then I draw a line along the edge of the ruler. And then I turn the fabric around and I do the same thing on the other side. Now what this does is this gives me my sewing line. So these 2 lines are what I'm going to sew on. So I'll repeat that on the other white fabric. So I just line up this dotted line from corner to corner on my white fabric, and then I draw a line with a pencil. Nothing fancy, just a regular pencil. And then we're going to sew. So we're going to take one of our blue squares, and then we'll put the white square on top. Now you want to have your fabric facing up for the blue square, or whatever color you have. And then your white square on top of that. Now if you had, this white is interchangeable, it doesn't matter which side's the top or not. But if you were using a pattern, like if you were having, say this was yellow and it was going to be blue and yellow, you would want to draw your lines on the back side, and then you would want to have your the right sides together as you sew them. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, and we'll head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew along both of these pencil lines on both squares. Okay, so we have our 2 squares here, and they've been sewn along the lines. Now we're going to use our straight edge ruler, and we're going to line it up. The edge of it is going to be from corner to corner between the seams. So you're going to go ahead and slice it right down the middle, and then you're going to have what is called a half square triangle. So you'll have 2 of those from that square, and then you'll go ahead and cut this one as well. We'll just line up the ruler from corner to corner between the 2 seams that we sewed, and we'll just slice it like that. Okay, so we have our little triangles here. Now before we open them up, we're going to use this handy dandy ruler to square up the triangles. So these are going to end up being 3.5 inches square after we square them up. So I have this ruler, and there's different markings on it. If I line up the 3.5 inch line right along the seam, and then I trim along the edges, then that will give me a perfect square when I open it up. Next we'll grab our handy mat here, and we're going to press these open. So one trick or tip that I have learned is called setting the seam. And so I just iron the pieces while they're still folded. It's called setting the seam. And then we're going to open them up. So on these, we want the seam to face towards the color of the fabric. So to do that, place the color on top, and then you'll just go ahead and press it open. So what happens when you look at the back of it, you can see that the extra fabric is on the side of the color. And that makes it so if it was on the other side, sometimes you can see through the fabric where it's white, especially if it's in the light or something. It just kind of helps it so that you don't see through the seam as easily. And we're going to press them all the same way. All right, now that we have these done, you can see they still have these little tails, so we'll just go ahead and trim those off. You can use your straight edge if you'd like. You could use just a pair of scissors to clip off these little tails, but we just want to remove those real quickly. Okay, so once those are all clipped, you have your half square triangles. So that is one way you can make a half square triangle. There's several different ways you can do them, but if you just need a couple, that's a simple way to make them. So now we're going to arrange our blocks into a pinwheel. So basically we'll just take all of our pieces and we'll just rotate them until they form the pinwheel look. So you'll just move them around until they form the pinwheel. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to take these two pieces, we'll put them right sides together, and then we're going to sew along this seam right here. Okay, so one thing I have set up on my sewing machine is I have this little piece of tape here that is indicating 1/4 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch away from my needle. And I like to have this tape here. I have these other markings, but this one goes right up close to the needle, so I can line up my fabric right along there and I get a perfect 1/4 inch seam as I'm sewing. Okay, so there's our first one. Now we'll take the bottom two, we'll fold them together with right sides together again, and we will stitch along this side 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so there we have our bottom half. Now this next part is a little trick I'm going to show you to help you get your points line up perfectly. So one part of getting your points to line up perfectly is to use a 1/4 inch seam. The other part is to nest your seams. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our fabric, they're both open, we're going to fold this one to this side. Then we'll fold this one to this side, okay? Now we're just going to set those seams. Now we're going to take this fabric and we'll open it up, pressing from the right to the left. And then we'll take our other fabric and we'll open it up and we'll press from the left to the right. It's harder to do with my left hand, so usually I move things around in order to accomplish this, but so there we have our two pieces. Now what it means to nest the seams. So when we take this, we're going to sew along the middle, right? We'll put it right sides together. So if you can see, once they're right sides together, the way that we have pressed the fabric or the seam, one of them is pointing to the right, the other side is pointing to the left. So what this allows is when you line up the fabric, you can interlock those seams. So you can butt them right up against each other and they lay fairly flat, and then I just always hold right there in that spot. Then I line up the sides and I sew 1/4 of an inch. When I get to that spot, then I continue sewing. But that interlocks the seams and that creates the perfect point. Okay, so here is our pinwheel block, and we'll just go ahead and press it. And we'll just press it open. Just like that. Okay, so here is our finished pinwheel block. This is 6.5 inches. Once it is sewn into a quilt or a quilt top, it will be 6 inches. On my website, I have a worksheet that tells you the different size squares to start with to create different size blocks. So go to Adventures of a DIY Mom to find that worksheet, and that's how you make the pinwheel block.